What up, Buck Squad? I'm your host, Jaron. I'm going to tell you why Glacier's comments on Todd Bowles actually makes a little bit of sense.
And I'm Ryan Lavoie, and I'm going to tell you the proper value and what a Yaya Diaby contract would look like.
Hey, Tampa Bay, it's the Buccaneers squad. Everything Tampa Bay Buccaneers every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of the Sunshine State, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. With a touch of the Buccaneer way, the Buccaneer Squad Show starts now.
All right, Buck Squad. Like I said, I'm your host, Jaron. We got a packed show for you today. Baker Mayfield and Yaya Diaby might be getting contract extensions this offseason. At least that's what it sounds like from Jason Light. And then we got to talk about Glazier's comments on Todd Bowles. And then Muhammad was picked as a most likely candidate to disappoint of Buccaneers free agent acquisitions. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to go around the NFL because there's been some major news when it comes to officiating. I'll talk about that at the end of the show. But first, let's dive into the Baker and Yaya Diaby stuff because, you know, we've talked about Baker's contract quite a bit on this show. I've already said many times, unless you're going to get him at some kind of discount, I just wouldn't re-sign him yet because it looks like you're all in on this year because you have a lot of one-year contracts. You obviously brought Todd Bowles back, which is possibly just 1 year if things go off the rails. So it doesn't really make sense for you to lock in a guy like that. But listening to Jason Light, like he said, no, that's our full attention right now is to get a deal done with Baker Mayfield. And then he also mentioned getting a deal done with Yaya. But he said Baker's still our quarterback. He's one of the toughest guys on the team. He's a great leader. Everything kind of revolves around the quarterback spot at some point. I'm sure we'll figure something out. There's no timetable on that. So he didn't necessarily say that they have to have it done before the season, but he said that is their focus right now in the offseason is to try to get that done. But I it is a hard position to be in because, and Tampa Bay knows, and the fans know too, it's not easy to find that franchise quarterback. And when you have one, it's hard to say, yeah, it's okay to let him go. We got to kind of rebuild and start working every position and fixing everything. Because, you know, I mean, how many quarterbacks did Tampa go through? Like, you know, tons of quarterbacks that you thought this was going to be the guy. I mean, Jameis Winston thought was going to be the guy. Wasn't, you know, Josh Freeman back in that day. Like, you thought he was going to be the guy, and he wasn't. Like, it's not easy to find quarterbacks in this league. And so it is a tough position to be in.
It is. I mean, the Bucs for decades have failed at drafting quarterbacks, and you know, it got so bad for time periods. I mean, we praised like 3-game samples of Ryan Fitzpatrick and guys
Right.
that would have just good moments rather than be able to piece together really good seasons. And so, you know, I think that this last few years has been such a luxury for Tampa being able to get Tom Brady, have your cake there, but then be able to eat it too when you actually did not have to go draft and take your luck in the draft again, and be able to get a Baker Mayfield that still had a lot to give, was a much better quarterback than other organizations thought/realized. So, you know, I think that it is interesting though that Jason Light is very much of the opinion that is going to be something that they want to take care of first when they think about long-term options. Because as we've discussed on the show, the Bucs are, I think, at a bit of a turning point where clearly if they don't win in somewhat of a meaningful way this year, there's going to be even more change than there's already been. And that process already began with Levante retiring, with Mike Evans moving on. But you're talking about a new head coach. You could be talking again. I've mentioned before a couple other defensive veterans moving on, and you know, maybe someone like Chris Godwin. I mean, you would look at very varying aspects of the team and start to think truly rebuilding it, because no version of the team, like I can't imagine the NFC South this year has their winner at 12-5. The Bucs go 10-7. They still fire Bowles and think they just need to retool. Like I think that the NFC South winner is still going to be one of the weaker division winners in the league next year. And if you don't win it, that means your team was not very good. And if you're not very good, then you're going to have to rebuild multiple things. It won't be a retool. So I say all that to say that Baker, he'll be 31 at the end of next year, so 32 when the new contract would begin. And you would just be looking at market value and just knowing how much the quarterback position has exploded over the last few years of financials. There's about 14 guys making $42 or so million per year right now. And then when you have a drop between Stafford and Darnold, I think Darnold's 15, making about 33 and a half, which is really what Baker's making right now. He was on the 3-year, $100 million contract. I would think he would be asking, obviously, for a raise. I think that he would probably be asking. He might ask for 3 for 150. That doesn't mean you give it to him. Something in there, or 4 for 160, which would be $40 million a year. I think somewhere in there, 40 to 50 million a year, depending on how many years you're talking about, is what he's going to ask for. And your question for Tampa is, can you build a winner around him in that period of time, given that salary figure? Because obviously that's going to be even a little bit more than you're accounting for right now. And it's not like the Bucs have perennial cap growth here where they're going to have a ton of cap space projected. So again, I think it's a little more complex than just locking him up. Again, I get the simplistic view, which again is he's already playing at a level that's better than the vast majority of the quarterbacks the Bucs have had. You're right. You can't win without a good quarterback. And again, taking your chances on another generation of quarterbacks is going to be tough. So there's very fair points, but I'm always trying to maximize, especially knowing how Tampa operates, and they don't just blindly throw money out there, even and sometimes it would be justified. I'm thinking how Jason Licht's going to operate and say, if they're going to occupy this much cap space with a quarterback, and even more than they are now, what does that mean for the rest of the team if they have not had a good 2026?
Yeah, and also Light talked about just how much they love Baker and how he's a true pro and all that. So I was going to bring up this. There's not many teams that I feel like, man, that I shouldn't say it that way, but Baker and the Bucs just fit perfectly. It feels like his personality, what they like in a quarterback, like they let him be Baker and they love every second of it. And if you're going to have wherever Baker goes, he's got to have that support for him to be well. We saw how bad it got with Cleveland when, it was great when Dorsey was there because Dorsey drafted him. Dorsey loved that. As soon as Dorsey left, the general manager, they didn't like the new general manager didn't like Baker, his personality and all that stuff. And it fell apart. Now, I think the Rams and Sean McVay would like that too. And that's always been the threat, the biggest threat, in my opinion, to Baker leaving, because they are on the same playing field in terms of Tampa gave Baker his break in terms of letting him become and be a starter again. But if the Rams don't pick him up when he got cut from the Panthers, that might not even happen. And so the Rams really kind of restarted the Baker Mayfield resurgence. And then if everyone remembers, it was that first game against the Raiders where he led the big drive down the field, scored the game winner. And that's when everyone was back to loving Baker again and everything. And so, and that's probably a big reason why the Bucs ended up signing him. And he played pretty well. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's not great, but if y'all remember that Rams team, a lot of backup linemen at that point of the season, of their star receivers. They were all out. Cooper Kupp, Puka, I don't know if was quite there yet at that point, but they had lost a lot because their best receiver was is it Skronsky, Ben Skron? I can't remember.
Skronsky, yeah,
that was like their best receiver. Him and Van Jefferson, who Van was solid, obviously, but a lot of their star guys were out at that point, and he put up solid numbers. But we do have a comment, and it's actually a really good question. It was about this, and it said, how do you feel about drafting someone like Taylon Green, I'm assuming is who they referred to by saying Green, and Drew Allard late and letting Baker play for a new deal? Two things about that. I am perfectly fine with drafting someone late, but you're not drafting someone late to say, Baker, you better perform well or this guy's taking your spot. because none of the guys that you're going to get late are that. I am not a Drew Aller fan. I was never a Drew Aller fan when everyone was hyping him up before this season and saying, hey, this guy could be a first-round draft pick. I think Drew Aller is the perfect example as a guy that has all the tools, and that's why a lot of people are very high on him. But if you watch his play doesn't match the tools. Another guy that I felt the exact same way about, and I'm not just saying this because he's not done well so far, was J.J. McCarthy. Ironically, they both were in the Big Ten. They both had great running games, and they played very similar style of football. Drew Aller, and that's why, if you remember in that college football playoff game against Notre Dame, when he took over late in the game, I had no worry that Penn State was going to go down and score a touchdown or a field goal to win the game. Now, I thought it was going to go to overtime. I didn't know he was going to go throw an interception, but I had no fear of Drew Aller doing anything. Taylor Green is the project, freak athlete. He's got some mechanical issues in his throwing game. He does have a strong arm. If you want to take a flyer on him late, I don't think he's going to last that long, like late, just because this isn't a great quarterback draft. I could see someone taking a flyer on him in like the third or fourth round kind of thing. But if you wanted to take a flyer on him very late, if he was still there, wouldn't hate it. But the likelihood of him becoming anything like as a starter, he's probably going to be more of a gadget type guy in his career.
Yeah, again, I'm not really convicted with – I'm not convicted with the quarterbacks at the top of the draft, much less guys, 7 through 12 on the prospect board. I mean, again, I like Mendoza at the top, but that's about it. And even then, for a number 1 overall pick, I don't think he's the strongest we've seen. So, again, I think that the reality is when you draft someone in the mid to late rounds, you're just hoping you get a career backup out of him most of the time.
Right.
I'm not sure that pushes Baker in a meaningful way. The problem is, and this is where you can talk towards, being very much behind Jason Light on this, and it being you pretty much, as long as Baker's arm doesn't fall off next year, need to do this and re-sign him. Along the lines of that point, if you were to take that argument, is if the Bucs go something like 7-10 or 8-9 again, and they don't win the division, and they're in the middle of the first round, and they don't re-sign Mayfield, then what is your access level to a good quarterback? There isn't a good access level to a good quarterback. And you're going to be taking a chance on a guy that's failed at multiple spots like Mayfield and having to try to play that over again. Again, someone that just doesn't fit anymore, is getting older, that you're taking a flyer on to get one last good year out of. I mean, you're in a bad place there. And then again, you're not high enough in the first round to feel great about getting one of the top couple quarterback prospects. So you get in the purgatory, and that's when you have to pretty much say, we're going to probably be awful in 2027, and then you can start your rebuild in 2028. So you've pushed it down the line a year. So there's definitely an argument for even overpaying Mayfield a little bit, because you get stuck in that middle. And I think that's where New Orleans has been. And maybe they get lucky with Shuck because he had a good close to the year. But if not, they have just continually won a couple too many. I hate to say it that way because the object is to win football games, but they've won a couple too many games for their own good because they're not making the playoffs with it. They're not even really that close in a way, although they got closer this year. But now they're not in top 5 range to draft the QB that will actually turn around for them. So anyway, you don't want Tampa to get in that kind of purgatory. And so I think there's definitely a little bit of uneasiness that the Bucs can kind of see that coming if this year doesn't work out. Jaron, I do want to mention one thing about the Yaya Diaby part of this too, in his contract situation. So again, you're talking about your number 1 pass rusher, but what would be number 2 on an ideal defense. And I was going through all the contracts signed right now in the league. Right now, 8 edge rushers make $30 million per year, 13 make $20 million per year, and 20 make $15 million per year. And I don't think anyone's going to argue Yaya's a top 10 or 15 guy. So you're probably looking at somewhere, hopefully, if you're the Bucs, you try to get somewhere in the $15 million a year range. Again, obviously, we always got to assume contract values go up over time, and they do. So, I mean, probably 4 for 60 spitballing somewhere in there would be what your ideal target would be, or 3 for 45. If you go higher than that, I just have concerns for someone around 7 sacks a year. I was looking at comps for guys that were somewhere in the 6 or 7 or 8 sack department range, like Yaya has been 2 out of his 3 years. Kwity Paye was 3 years, $48 million this offseason. Draymond Jones, who's been a little less productive, was 3 for 36. Joseph Asai, 3 for 34. So again, you're probably looking somewhere in that range on the Yaya side, because again, obviously Jason Light did mention Yaya in this kind of long-term contract wave too.
Yeah, and one of the comments was asking, is Yaya really an elite edge rusher or just a good player on a bad defense? I don't think he's elite. I don't think anyone is making the case that he's elite. And I don't think he's just a good player on a bad defense either. I think he's a guy that even if you had an elite defense, I think he's still a starter on an elite defense. Because I think he's a really good number 2, like Ryan said. He's not a number 1. Like, he's not going to be your Myles Garrett. He's not going to be your Max Crosby. He's not going to be those guys, Von Miller in his prime. Like, that's not what he is. But he's a very good number 2. I kind of compare him, like, if you want to look at a comparison, look at wide receivers. You could go with a great example with the Bucs, but you could also go with the Bengals right now. Jamar Chase, elite, and that offense is elite, and he's elite. When Burrow and all of them are healthy, it's elite. But Jamar Chase is elite. T. Higgins is still a very good starting wide receiver. Is he a Jamar Chase level? No, but he is still very good. And even on an elite offense, he's a starter type. You could make that same comparison with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Puka. We saw Puka and Devontae Adams this past year. Like, Diaby is that. He is not ever going to be your top guy, most likely. And if he is, you probably don't have a great defense. But he is, and because that's what we've seen, because he has been there.
Yeah, that's what happened this year.
But he is a very good player still, and he's one that, like Ryan mentioned, if you don't have to pay him, which you shouldn't have to, but if you don't have to pay him elite edge rusher money, you absolutely want him on your team.
Yeah, again, if they're pushing 20 plus million, they're going to have to say no to that. Although, again, Diaby's going to operate from leverage if the Bucs did not get Al-Quadin Muhammad right or do not draft someone of high caliber, which we can talk about a little bit later. But again, the market says, okay, if the top 20 guys make at least $15 million per year, I'm willing to put him in the top 20 or 25 of paid guys. Again, maybe he's a little short of that, but you would be paying for someone that's a little bit younger than some of the guys that are also going to be signed, so you factor that in too. Also, I mean, you're talking about doing this before this season happens. Well, it's like, okay, what happens in his 4th season in the league? Because he's got a couple 7+ sack years, but then he had the 4.5 in year 2. So if I'm paying for 7 to 8 sacks, again, that's why I'm good with the 15, 16 million a year. If I'm paying for 4 or 4.5 sacks, knowing he's not necessarily too meaningful in run stop, then okay, at that point, I'm not trying to go into the upper teens either.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we now officially know why Todd Bowles is back as the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's talk about it next. Well, what if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for another segment of the Bucs Squad Show. Reminder, this is just extra content we do twice a week. We do it on Mondays and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Doesn't take anything away from the great content that James puts out throughout the week. Just a reminder, we told you on Monday, but wanted to remind you for next week. We will be shifting to Tuesday and Thursday just for next week. Because the national championship college basketball game will be on Monday. we didn't want to do a podcast Tuesday and Wednesday, so we're doing Tuesday and Thursday. Hopefully James's Illini is in there. Hopefully Marcus's Michigan is in there. Hopefully Ryan's Auburn Tigers are in the NIT National Championship. And it's not looking good right now, but hopefully my Oklahoma Sooners are in the Crown National Championship, so we can have all of it.
We're on all the levels. We are all playing for something, even if you and I and our teams are playing for like these little baby trophies in the corner.
Right.
They're playing for something.
We're playing for something. So hopefully all that works out. Also, I meant to mention this at the start. Right now in my area, we have some severe weather, some hail. I think they even talked about some tornadoes. So if my power goes out or something and we lose it, that would be why. Hopefully, knock on wood, we'll be able to get through this show before any of that takes place. But let's talk about Joel Glazer, because he said some really interesting comments about Todd Bowles. He was kind of asked about, why did you decide to keep him? And he said, hey, I'd say as a franchise, everybody's goal is to win the Super Bowl every year. That's your hope, but only one team does win the Super Bowl every year. In any given season, you've got to look at the season, look at how things went, look at where the franchise is at, look at the totality of the situation as year in and year out. That's how you evaluate things. Last year started out great, didn't end so well. Obviously, we were disappointed. Obviously, our fans were disappointed, but there's a little more to it. Before continuing where he, talks about the injuries and things like that, just going off of that, I have a couple comments on it. I said in the start, hey, his comments kind of make sense, and they do. And then basically what he's saying, and I disagree with it because I was one of the big ones that said, hey, let's let Todd Bowles go. But he's basically saying this was a pass because of all the injuries. Again, I disagree with it, but that's what he has gone with. The other thing I feel like he is saying is just that I have an issue with is the part where he says everyone's trying to win a Super Bowl and only one team can win a Super Bowl. But some teams are closer than others, and we don't feel very close. And that's the issue that a lot of Bucs fans have. Like, yeah, I understand that only one team can win it, but that's something the Patriots should be saying. That's not something the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who choked down the stretch and didn't make the playoffs, should be saying.
Yeah, no, and I agree completely because, look, last year, even though the season had gone completely haywire at the end, I was still very vocal about I still found value in winning the division. Winning it for what would have been a fifth consecutive year was very meaningful for the NFC South and for the Bucs. And so, look, didn't mean they were going to win a playoff game. Obviously, you saw Carolina was capable to push the Rams. The Bucs had their shot at the Rams in the regular season. Didn't go well at all. So, again, don't love Tampa's chances, but that was not the point. The point was kind of along the lines of what the Glazers was saying, is that there are valuable things in the NFL other than winning Super Bowls. And again, I know that's hard to believe because we're training everyone at every level of sport that only the champion matters. But I still believe that other teams can have quality seasons without winning the Super Bowl. And It doesn't matter if you're coming from a history where the Bucs missed the playoffs for more than a decade in a row, or whether you're someone like the Patriots that just won 1 million Super Bowls. Like I still think there's value in having playoff runs, winning divisions, and that sort of thing. But the reality is that Tampa was playing in the worst division in the NFL. And I know there's trying to be some buts because the Saints came on, and so no one was truly terrible from start to finish. But okay, fine. The worst team to win a division was Carolina. And, I think that when you don't win that, and when you're coming from a place that you still were able to navigate a lot of those aforementioned injuries early in the season, and then you fall apart the second that you get healthier, that doesn't make sense. It kind of devoids the argument of, oh man, and the injuries. Okay, well, oh man, you were 6-2. You lost to teams when you were actually healthier that were below you in the standings from start to finish. And you had ample opportunities. All you had to do was be above 500, and you beat Seattle early in the season, who won the Super Bowl
at
Seattle.
Defense.
I mean, who else got that quality of a win this season in hindsight? So my issue was, and this is why I have a generally bleak outlook for next year, which again we're still months from, but you'll continue to pick up on it as the months do roll along, is that I do think there was a coaching issue, and I do think there's a lack of development in some spots. And when you have those issues, you can draft whoever you want, but their growth is going to be a little bit stunted if you're not developing players properly. So, look, it's above Jason Light's pay grade, unfortunately, which again is unlike other sports because usually the GM does get control on coach hirings and firings, but
Right.
we know in the NFL it works a little bit different. And this was also where I politely say, and I hate it, but it's true. Glazers are not well known to be great owners. Like ask
Yeah.
Manchester United fans how they feel about how that club is run. I mean, like there was the Bucs were run better in some ways, or at least from the fans' point of view, than Man U. And look, the Bucs, I can tell you from the general opinion, is still not favorable for the Glazers at all. It's just not as horrendous as what the opinion of Man United fans was. So when you get the 29th best report card from the player association
Yeah.
rankings, and you've been down at the bottom year after year, ownership has the right to go in and retool everything. They see those report cards and they're like, man, we got to do better. We got to treat families better. We got to get a better training staff. We got to upgrade our facilities. No, there's been none of that in the last few years. I think that's a trait of a not good ownership. So I think that's the reality here is that, I disagree with the Glazers' assertion that it was just injuries that derailed the season. That's not how it was.
Right, and you made a good point there where you said it's not the first year they've been towards the bottom in those things. Like
No.
it's actually almost every year they're at the bottom. And so you would think they would start making some changes because we keep saying, well, Tampa's not going to go get the big fish because that's just not historically what they do. Is it not historically what they do because of their philosophy, or is it historically not what they do because players don't want to go play for the 29th most satisfied, team, like it doesn't want to go play for a Porsche training staff or doesn't want to, all this stuff. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I bet it's a part of it. So maybe they're making these deals because that's all they've got to work with because of all of the players that are taking themselves out. I'm with you. I don't agree that it was all injuries. I think the injuries did play a part, but to your point, when you had the most guys out was when you were playing your best football, and it was down the stretch that you didn't. I do think, someone said in here they didn't hold Bowles accountable, but they put the blame on the OC. I think they held him accountable to an extent because I don't think they were blaming just the OC. I think all of the staff changes were made by the Glazers. I think they told him or Jason Light too, but you're making these moves or you're gone. And so he made the OC move. You remember for those that don't remember, there's a ton of position coach moves. And some of those coaches have been there with him for a long time and they're no longer here. Now some retired. But I will say this. Did they retire because they wanted to retire because they were ready to retire, or you don't know? You don't know that answer. And so I do think people were held accountable for it, and we see this all the time when a team has a coach that has been there for a while or has done well with them. Kind of their final straw is you fire everyone around you, and you better get it right. And if you don't, you're all gone next year. And that kind of just feels like that's what they're doing right now.
And you see, you talk about the offense, and look, I'm not going to defend Grizzard because it wasn't a great job. But, okay, but your defense was healthier than the offense, and that's what Todd Bowles works on. So
Right.
the defense wasn't any better than the offense. In fact, I think there was more times the defense let the team down than the offense. So, yeah,
Right.
again, there's blame to go around. The blame pie has many factors and many slices, and certainly there's not many players or coaches exempt from it. But I think that I had given credit with Todd the other year because he had gotten Liam Cohen, and as the CEO of the team, not only are you coaching the players, you're also responsible for that staff. And look, he did a good job getting Liam Cohen, but
Right.
you also have to take part of the blame at least when you hire someone else. And they just went internally with Grizzard, and again, totally understood it. It just. Again, I can't say that after watching Todd's teams for years that there's an overall arc to the team. It just kind of fluctuates between, it's a little better and it was a little worse. And
Right.
that's all you feel like you're going to be with him. I think I mentioned it back a few months later or a few months ago that, okay, like the Bucs could turn around and win the division next year, but I think there's a very clear ceiling that they're not going to go more than 10 or so wins. And
Right.
there's a clear ceiling that they're not winning more than one playoff game. And if you're going to start dealing with the lows, then you have to acknowledge that you don't have very high highs. And I just said there's value in winning divisions. Okay, but the expectation is that you continue to do that when you're in a weak division. And you can't really take off years just because some guys got hurt and some things were less than ideal. So, again, I think that on one hand, again, huge blame pie. I do blame some defensive issues on Light because I don't think that they've done a good job of identifying X factor players, but also they've had the scheme where, okay, we talked about Yaya last segment. There's never a good reason that Yaya Diaby's 40 yards down the field. Like you can
Right.
kind of put him into the flat from time to time, I guess. If you, again, there's always going to be creative things that you do, and sometimes it really works well when you put a lineman all of a sudden in the
Mm-hmm.
flat or into the slot. But Yaya trying to cover a guy 40 yards down the sideline, like that's never going to be on a player. That's going to be on a coach. So anyway,
Especially when he's your only decent pass rusher.
right. Take your 4 worst pass rushers and rush them instead. So again, we've litigated a lot of that, but again, we just ultimately were on the same page. We don't agree with the Glazers. Again, I don't think it was the worst response I've ever heard. I think they could have still
Right.
done, oh, you guys just don't understand. Like, how dare you? Like, there was some sense of understanding there, but
Yeah.
ultimately I still don't agree with the reasoning.
Yeah, no, 100% on that. And it's a frustrating thing to be in as a fan because we feel like so strongly that, hey, it's time to move on from Todd Bowles. At least a lot of people do, and your ownership comes out and backs the coach. But with that being said, what is he supposed to do? Because if he comes out and say, yeah, I mean, it was a mistake, or if he said, yeah, he's going to have a short leash this year. I've always said if you can fire a coach within 4 games or mid-season, let's say, you should have fired him before the season. Because if he's on the hot enough seat where he has to do well early in the season, he just needs to go. And now I will say, going off of his comments, doesn't sound like they're at that point where they would fire him during the season. They even made the comment that there's not a win total he has to get to save his job. That's what they said. And so I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I see it all the time where they'll keep a coach and 3 games in, fire him because they're 0-3. And it's like, if you could fire him then, why didn't you fire him earlier and get to someone else that you wanted? Like, it drives me crazy.
And just might I add real quick that I don't think there's anyone on the staff that streams head coaching candidate. Like we're talking about, offensive coordinators that they were trying to hire, and that would have been the advantage that you could have gotten a veteran like McDaniel, which obviously, again, understand why he went where he went. But the whole, part of the appeal that I would have pitched, which is a little bit, again, I get it, you can't really do it, but it's like, okay, we move on from that guy, you would get your turn. Well, they're not going to, put Zach Robinson as a meaningful head coach candidate. I can't fathom that.
Right.
And they don't have anyone on their defensive staff that's been doing enough because Todd Bowles has been calling the plays, running the show. So, if they did move on, you're just having a guy for morale to try to piece you through the rest of the season. And again, we'll see how this I'll be fascinated in May when it comes. I guess it'll be sometime in May when it comes out, because I think the opponents on there, we know them and they're pretty tough. So, I mean, it could line up. If you don't have divisional games early, you could run into a really tough stretch to start the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think the Grizzard move was, I know we got to get to a break, but I think that was, they nailed 2 outside hires, but both immediately left for head coaching jobs. They thought, hey, if we get this inside hire, maybe he will stay a little longer. We think the offense is so talented, it'd be hard to mess that up anyways. And they just took the safe, easy route. Didn't pay off. They thought it was the safest route. Plain and simple, didn't pay off. And now you got to fix it. So we'll see what happens there. Real quick, I want to tell you a little bit about the Actually, let's go to a break and we'll come back and talk about the Everydayer Club. We'll do that next. All right, Bucs Squad. We're back for one final or another segment of the Bucs Squad show. Not getting rid of you just yet. Can't do that to you guys, but I did want to talk about the Everdayer Club real quick. So this is something that I'm sure James has talked to everyone about, but it's a great opportunity. Don't forget to check it out. It's ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with James and other listeners of the show. I'm actually in that chat as well. You can tap the link in the show notes or go to the show URL to learn more information about that. It's really awesome. I hope you guys go and check that out. I wanted to talk about Al-Quadin Muhammad. Obviously, he's, I guess you could say, one of the bigger free agent signings they had this year. I mean, there wasn't a ton of massive ones, so you could argue he's one of the bigger ones. But this article was Detroit Jock City, which hey, that's got to be kind of a teller by why they named him this, because he obviously was a Detroit Lion and he left. But he was picked as a guy that they thought would very likely be a letdown. And they gave some, I will say this, they gave some very good reasons. They talked about how he had a career high in sacks, quarterback hurries, quarterback hits, TFLs, all of that. But they said it's for a couple reasons. They think it's going to be a flop. One of the reasons is he's not going to be across from a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, which we brought up on the show when he came in. Like that's obviously a big deal. He also just talked about the troubles that Tampa's pass defense has, and one of their best corners is Jamel Dean, and he's obviously no longer here anymore. And so does that affect him? Because if the quarterback can get it out quick because the secondary is not in the right spot or whatever, then obviously he's not going to put up the same numbers. But the other thing is that they mentioned was this last season an outlier? It's by far the best season he's had. Is it just an outlier? And all those are really hard to argue. Now, all we said when Tampa signed him was we felt they would still go edge rusher either in the first round or second round, and him and Yaya would be your cornerstones, and Muhammad would kind of be that rotational one that you hope can put up 4 or 5 sacks off the bench. That's ideal situation. I still think he can be successful at that, even if it's a down year. I'm not having him come in expecting him to put up what he did with Detroit or be better than that.
Yeah, there's 2 fields of vision that you can look at this through, and they're looking at it through the first one. So I'll go over the first one. That would be you were signing a free agent with him being your new best pass rusher, him replacing Yaya Diaby for that title. And I said that should be the goal for the Bucs off season is Yaya's good, but you were successful or unsuccessful based off, did you make Yaya your number 2 guy, or is he still your number 1 edge rusher?
Right.
And if you look at it through that lens, I think there's a bit of a low probability that Al-Quadin Muhammad will end up being better than Yaya this season, despite the production we saw last year. 11 sacks last year. His previous 8 seasons in the league, he had a combined 16 sacks. So you can be the judge on whether he's hit something that will last for the next few years of his career, or if that was kind of a one-hit wonder. I hope it's not a one-hit wonder. But if you're looking at it through the lens of did you get your best pass rusher on the team in Al-Quadin Muhammad, yes, you set yourself up for disappointment. If you look at it through the other lens, which is he is someone that just had a career year, but he has never, until last year, really been a top priority for a team. He's never really been someone that defenses look towards to scheme around or anything of that sort. And then you look at the fact that you're going to pay him just $4 million this year. You say, can you get $4 million worth of production from Al-Quadin Muhammad? That lens, I would say, I'm probably not going to be disappointed, because to me, $4 million is not 11 sacks. I mean, I hope for it, but you don't have to give me 11 sacks to make me think $4 million was worth it. There's also kind of the hey, the Bucs just paid Hassan Reddick last year $10 million to get a whole lot of nothing. And so if he just does better than Hassan Reddick at $4 million, in that sense, that was an improvement. Now, again, that's a pretty low bar to clear. But I think that, again, there's just so many guys out there. He's just not going to be the most disappointing guy, because I think most people realize that this is a value hit that maybe he can be towards the 11 sack guy. Because I'll give you one more year. I mentioned, he had the 15 sacks in the 7 years prior. He's been in the league 8 years. Okay, fine. Can you have the 2021 season in Indy where he had 6 sacks? Like, I would sign up for 6 sacks right now out of him, because as you said, Jaron, I'm not banking on him to be the every down pass rusher. I am hoping still the Bucs will draft a pass rusher that will easily supplant him, and that he will be the number 3 guy, or be with Anthony Nelson sometimes fighting for the number 3. Like, there's also again a world where you're looking at Nelson a little bit too. So yeah, I think that ultimately I just think that it's a reach to say, okay, he's going to be one of your top guys in the league. That's not what $4 million is ever going to insinuate out of a free agent, no matter what the name is attached, no matter what the season he just had. If I'm signing someone for $4 million, my expectations are not to go be all pro.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like, I'm kind of confused, because it says most likely to be a letdown. That kind of insinuates that Tampa is signing him hoping he will fix a lot of their pass rush problems and be this 11, 12, 13 sack guy next year. And I just don't think Tampa looks at him that way. I think Tampa looks at him as he's another solid pass rusher like Yaya is. And, if we can have 2 solid pass rushers and then draft a guy that we think is going to be an elite pass rusher, that's a really good rotation. And not many people will have that rotation in the National Football League. And so I think they're looking at it like in that lens of a depth piece. And it's not looking at the lens of, we need this guy to be a starter. We need him and Yaya both to get 8, 9, 10 sacks together. Like that, I just don't see them looking at it that way. So that's why I can't be let down by his season, no matter really what he does. Now, I mean, I guess if he goes and gets 2.5 sacks and has the Hassan Reddick type year, and, Yaya does what Yaya does, but you draft a guy and he's not quite ready yet to make big production, he only gets you 7, 8 sacks, then maybe you're let down a little bit by what Muhammad does. But even in that case, I would be more let down by what the draft pick did than what Muhammad did, because the draft pick is supposed to kind of be that guy that takes over. And so I'd be more upset with that than I would be with Muhammad in that case.
100%. I was going to use kind of along those lines of an example, because it's like when you draft the same position in the 2nd round and in the 5th round, and you get the exact same production from both in year number 1. Well, that means the 5th round guy you're going to be pretty pleased with. Oh, that's not bad. That's pretty good. We did a good job with that pick. But the 2nd round guy is like, that's kind of meh. It's underwhelming. And then you kind of use that to say, oh, this guy's drafting well in the mid to late rounds, but this guy's not drafting very well early. Well, same thing with free agency. If I'm signing an edge for $20 million and an edge for $4 million, if I get 6 sacks out of the $20 million guy and 6 sacks out of the $4 million guy, I'm ecstatic about the $4 million guy, and I'm very disappointed with the $20 million a year guy. And look, I'm still overall disappointed by the offseason thus far, and specifically that, because again, I looked at this as saying, did you get someone better than Yaya? And I hate to just keep saying a version of that over and over again, but that's, I think, the clearest way, because to me, he's somewhere in the 25 to 35 range in the league. And so you can argue he's like the worst number 1 pass rusher, or one of the worst number 1 pass rushers, or he's one of the best number 2s. But nevertheless, you're not feeling that's a great part of your team if he's number 1, even if you can market to me that there are a couple worse starters than him or worse number 1s than him. And so that was the point for me, where you've had success if you've done better, you've not had success if you've done worse. And now they've confined themselves to, they have to get the draft pick right, because I don't expect Muhammad to be better. I expect him to be better than Reddick was. I expect him to contribute a little bit and hopefully challenge Yaya a little bit.
Right.
But I don't expect him to surpass Yaya. And also, there's the piece too, and I know Yaya is a little bit older than a 4th-year guy typically is. I think he's already 26, and he'll be 27 when the season starts. But there's also a little bit of a hope that, okay, Yaya's not done getting better, and maybe he can get a little bit better than what he is now. Again, we're hoping for a lot of different things here. The reality is they've not done, I think, enough to feel good about that room. And It's disappointing because, again, it was the most clear need on the board coming into the season. So, yes, the Bucs could be disappointed with their edges next year as a whole. I don't think they'll be specifically disappointed about Al-Quadin Muhammad for $4 million.
And the $4 million, you brought that up a couple times. That's the thing I want people to kind of focus on. I know a lot of people will say, "Hey, he's an 11 sack guy." That's my expectation. Your expectation should be off what his market was telling you. His market was telling you with the $4 million that it might have been a fluke season, and they were looking at it as an outlier of a season, and we want to see you do it again. And that's why you sign him to a deal like that. And so if he doesn't go out and get 11, 12 sacks, what 4 million guys do? Unless you're some rookie that just explodes off. Like, that just doesn't happen. I mean, if he got 6 sacks, you basically paid, a little less than a million per sack? I mean, you would take that kind of thing. You got guys getting 20, 30 million that are getting 10 sacks. So you wouldn't be upset by that number. But all right, coming up next, we're going to go around the NFL, look at some of the biggest topics, including some major changes that could be coming to the NFL this year. We'll also answer some of your questions. I know some of y'all have been throwing out questions throughout the show, but keep them coming. We've tried to answer them best throughout, but we're going to spend the next segment talking about a lot of it. So don't go anywhere. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for our final segment of the Bucs Squad Show. Just a reminder, this extra content we do twice a week, Mondays, Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Doesn't take anything away from the great things that James does. I will say, we brought this up earlier. We also talked about Monday. Next week, we will be Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. We will not be Monday and Wednesday, but definitely check out James throughout the week. So big thing that is happening in the NFL right now, and like I mentioned right before the break, get your questions in. We'll answer some of those. But big thing that's happening in the NFL right now is a negotiation with the officials, and they haven't been able to come to agreement yet. So the NFL is preparing. I know this is going to give a lot of people PTSD, but they're already preparing for the replacement officials. They're looking at the D1, D2, and D3 level of college to find those replacement officials. I know as soon as people think of replacement officials, at least I do, I immediately go to that Seattle game where you had the game-winning touchdown pass, clear push-off. It was an interception, but then they said, nope, tie is a touchdown, and bunch of stuff just went crazy in that one. That's what I immediately think of. It also, the one thing that I remember from the replacement officials the first time around is it just shows just how hard it is to be an official in the NFL, because there was a clear drop-off. And this was some of the better officials at their level coming to the NFL, and there was a clear drop-off between the two. I've always felt that football overall is officiated decently well. There's obviously always going to be stuff you're going to complain about. I've always thought basketball is the worst officiated sport. I think it's terrible. Other people that are big baseball people can argue umpires. But I think college basketball specifically is the worst officiated sport in any sport. It is so bad. But football-wise, I think it's actually pretty decent. But there's a big gap between the NFL and college level, and you see that. And so hopefully they're able to get something done, because this is going to be a major storyline this year. And it's going to bite some team. And it might even bite a team that's at the end of the year in playoff contention, and that's what's holding them out.
It's a reality that we don't like to acknowledge, but for the most part, there's always few outliers, as there is with anything. But for the most part, we have the best refs that we're going to have at both the NFL level and then the high levels of college football. And it's not just an unlimited supply of bodies to go and make calls. And I'm as guilty as anyone, because I can't tell you how many cuss words come out on a Saturday or Sunday, and they're oftentimes more directed at officiating than they are at players or anything of the like. And so, I will say, though, again, just like I hear on the radio show I do all the time, like talking SEC football or talking just football in general. Okay, this team should be a top 25 team. Okay, well, then someone has to be, because you have a top 25. So maybe they're not who you think is a top 25 team, but someone has to replace them. Unless you're just talking in general, the annals of history, this is not your average run-of-the-mill top 25 team, which people are not talking about. It's like, okay, someone has to jump in there. So in the same way, if you don't like these officials or don't like that official, what have you, someone's got to be an official. Someone's got to work there. And unfortunately, we kind of found that out the last time we had replacement refs, as short-lived as that was. So again, this is not a commentary on refs or elite and they're scot-free. I mean, they're never wrong and they're blameless. But at the same time, it can get far worse. Just if you are a college football fan, watch a Big Ten or SEC game and watch that there are going to be bad calls. Then try to watch the Sun Belt or Conference USA.
Right.
And the guys are like sometimes not even turning to the right side of the field to announce the decision, or just God knows what. So that is kind of what happens here. And so it would be a story. I don't know all the particulars, all the financials and that sort of thing. I haven't delved into it, but I do hope that they sort it out, because the level of officiating would absolutely go down.
Yeah, and I hate laughing at that kind of stuff because I know I'd be a terrible official. Like, I don't want to be an official. I have a friend that every single time I gripe about an official, he's like, well, then why don't you go? And I'm like, I don't want to be one. I am much happier seeing stuff from here and talking about it. But no, that's a great point, because there's a drop-off even from just the SEC Power 4 conferences to Group of 5 conferences. And, like you said, someone has to do it. And hopefully they get it figured out, because it's not an easy task. And like you mentioned, like every single time someone's not doing a good job and you're like, man, how is that guy even employed? Someone's got to do it. And they are usually probably better than the next best option. So we did get a question, and it said, what do you think about the wide receiver room without Mike? In my opinion, I think we are fine. Yeah, we're missing the red zone body target, but McMillan is a dog, and I think Robinson can scheme some good stuff. Overall, I like the room. I like Ibuka. I like McMillan. Obviously, Godwin's older, but I still think he's solid. He's kind of injury prone, but I still think he's solid. I even like Tez, but they're not very different body-wise in terms of they don't have the big body like you mentioned in that deal. So you don't really have the red zone target unless Cade becomes that red zone target, a bigger body tight end. But we saw last year we had, 2 tight end touchdowns all season or something like that.
Yeah, they were the last one in the league to have a receiving touchdown out of tight end.
Yeah, and it wasn't Cade, I don't think, was the one that caught it. It was the backup, Culp. What's his first name?
Yeah,
I
Devin.
can't think of his first name.
Devin Culp. Yeah.
Yeah, Devin. Yeah, he ends up catching the touchdown early. But so unless like Cade can come back, and I will say Cade, we had seen that with Baker. He had been a decent red zone target at times in his career. So unless he becomes that. So I think the body types are concerning, because you would like to have almost like an NBA team, a really tall guy and all the way down to your smaller guys. But this is one thing I will say, because I want to see this. Ibuka was great this year. I am not taking anything away from Ibuka. But I said this when he was drafted, and I still stick with it despite him having a great year. I am curious if he can be a number one. The reason is he was a big-time 5-star recruit, and if you look at his career, he had the most receiving yards in Ohio State history, and it is a great list of guys he's a higher than. But he was never the number one. He was never the number one. He was never the go-to. He always had someone, and again, they had great receivers, and that's a big part of it. But he always had guys that would always be better than him, and he would never take that full step to be the number one. Never would do it. You always thought he'd be the next guy that would be that guy, and he never could do it. And so that's my biggest concern is Ibuka just a really good number two, which is nothing wrong with that. I mentioned T. Higgins earlier. I mentioned Devonta Smith. These are very good number twos. They're probably low-end wide receiver ones, but they're very good wide receiver two, top of the line. And I wonder if he's that, and Mike being that wide receiver one really benefited him. And I know Mike missed a lot of time this year with him, but I wonder if losing that and him getting thrown into the wide receiver one, if we ever see that Ibuka, can he take that step?
At least he's had the full off season, or he's going to have the full off season to
Right.
know that that's going to be the expectation. He thrown in as rookie last year to a team that had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I don't think exactly he thought the targets were going to be flying his way as early as they did. And again, that's part of the reason he had such great early moments. I mean, everyone's going to always remember the Seattle game where he and JSN were just going back and forth, Ohio State on Ohio State. So again, I think that I think it's in there, and I'm going to choose to believe that the last 6 or 7 games were more of a rookie wall. But to your point, he is not used to this, and I don't want to completely butcher it, so I'm going to be a little vague. But I do remember there was the advanced statistics that were pretty much like he's terrible in separation, like he's creating no separation.
Yeah.
And so that's a concerning thing. Now it also means that he's a pretty good contested catch guy, but also again has his awards like everyone. So I don't know. It's going to be a very important year for him, and I do expect 1,000 yards because he was hitting right on the cusp of it last year. So I think he can get that. But yeah, having Godwin still there, seeing what Jalen McMillan has again, I'm intrigued. I think there was some up and downs clearly in his rookie year. The very small sample we got out of 4 games last year, though, looked pretty good.
Yes.
He's, obviously not going to be number 1, not saying that. But I think there's a world he becomes a number 2. And I didn't think that after his rookie year necessarily. But I can kind of see the 800, 900 yard in there somewhere. So you got to see on that. But I think that ultimately the core is good. I don't think it's going to win the award. But I think that they've got enough pieces where it shouldn't be an issue. Like I don't think unless there's massive injuries, we go into the middle of next year and the team's struggling. We're like, man, the wide receivers are awful.
Right.
I think that's just not expected. There's so many other parts about the team that would concern me more. I think that's still going to ultimately be a strength, even if it's not necessarily as dynamic as it has been in years past.
And I will say that, and again, I'm going to preface this by saying there was a lot of issues with Tampa Bay offensively last year, so it's not just his fault. But with that being said, when he was kind of thrown into that wide receiver 1 role with the injuries and things like that, the final 8 games of the season, he had 23 catches for 261 yards and no touchdowns. He had 2 games where he had over 40 yards receiving in those last 8 games. One of those games was 42 yards, so it wasn't much. The other game was 64 yards, which still isn't a whole lot more, but it's a little more. And that was basically the whole latter half of the season because, remember, he comes out of the bye with a great game against New England, 115 yards, 6 catches, a touchdown. And then every game after that, he couldn't do anything. And a big part of it was the separation aspect. He did struggle to separate. And we also saw Baker at that point. His accuracy was kind of waning. That's when he was getting hurt and stuff like that. So when Baker wasn't throwing these pinpoint perfect passes, Ibuka didn't have the same success, which when a guy struggles to separate, if you don't put it right there, perfect pass, he's not going to be able to catch it or do anything with it. And so it puts even more pressure on the quarterback to make a perfect pass. And it's just not a realistic thing for any quarterback, let alone a guy like Baker who is, in that 10 to 15 range of a quarterback.
Yeah, and look, I remember we did the same song and dance at the end of last year when we were like, that throw is on Mayfield, but that one's kind of on the receiver, and that incompletion's kind of on Baker, and then that one's kind of on the receiver. I mean,
Right.
it kind of pivoted back and forth. But again, I think that ultimately, they've been very proactive on that front. Again, last year at this time, wide receiver was not really on the radar to draft. Certainly not the first round. I mean, they could have done it in the mid rounds again, but when they did it, it kind of told us that there was either, hey, Godwin may not return to form next year, or if ever again after another huge knee injury, hey, Mike Evans' time is winding down sooner than you think. And so they were kind of right. Like I'd like to think Godwin still got something meaningful left if he's healthy. He just was not healthy at any point last year, but hopefully, again, he will be healthy coming into the year, and we can see what that version of him still is. Because the Chris Godwin we knew and loved was a very dependable, reliable, excellent premier number 2, and again, could have been a number 1 for weaker teams. I think though that they again did themselves a favor in hindsight with the Ibuka pick. Whether he actually becomes the stud number 1, remains to be seen. Very important that he does become that, since that was the first round pick. But again, I think, and if you want to add in the running backs to it, and you want to add in Otten, like, I don't think skill positions are where this team is going to falter. I just don't. If they falter, it's defense mainly. If it's something offensive, it might be offensive line. It might be interior O-line in particular. Obviously, you can't plan for the lack of health that they had last year. Again, you're doing a lot of hoping that the injury bug doesn't bite you in the same way. But even then, they had their chances last year. So that's why I don't think the roster's in such a bad shape. And again, with wide receivers in particular, don't think it's in bad shape.
I think Godwin, even at this stage, can just be your move the chains guy. I still think he knows coverages. He knows where the openings are. I think he knows how to get open. He's not going to be the guy he once was, but if he can just be almost that hybrid tight end type thing, just your third down guy, I think he can be successful with that. All right, that's going to do it for the Bucs Squad Show. Reminder, we will be doing Tuesday and Thursday next week, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So we hope to see you there. Hopefully, good luck to James Illini. Good luck to Marcus's Michigan. Good luck to your Auburn. And Oklahoma has come back, and we're up by 3. So hopefully come Monday, we've got a national championship to talk about. We've got an NIT. Y'all would be in the championship, right? Because it would be the championship.
NIT Sunday, Easter Sunday.
Okay,
this Sunday.
So maybe we would have an NIT champion, and the crown is the 3 days. So hopefully the crown champion, hopefully we have it all covered when we come back on Tuesday. But until next time, fire the cannons.